Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, a failed military coup in Turkey last week shocked the world and left hundreds dead. Ankara is still picking up the pieces of internal division. Is national unity under threat? And the Philippines is ready to talk with China over the South China Sea after an arbitration case unilaterally requested by its former president ruled against China. Are China-Philippine ties about to take a major turn? And we start today's show in Turkey, where the Turkish government has detained thousands in connection with the failed coup last Friday. Authorities say the coup attempt has left more than 290 dead and 1,400 hurt. Thousands of Turks rallied in support of Turkish President Erdogan, but there is still the unanswered question of who really is behind the coup. With all this uncertainty, the Turkish government is now seeking to bring some stability back to the nation, some say.
A show of defiance. Waving Turkish flags, President Tayyip Erdogan's supporters rallied in public squares, at Istanbul airport and outside his palace overnight Sunday into Monday.
Those who want to drag us into chaos by causing trouble and staging a coup, you should know nobody succeeds in that, and neither will you. You will not manage to break our unity and solidarity.
Last Friday, a faction within Turkish military attempted to overthrow the government, shooting off a bridge, trying to capture the city's main airport, and sending tanks to parliament in Ankara. Turkish authorities wrestled back control of the country on Saturday. Erdogan has called for the use of capital punishment after the failed coup.
We cannot delay this decision much because those who stage a coup against the state should pay the price.
Turkey has gone through 4 military coups in its history. Since 1960, the Turkish army has intervened in politics and played the role of protector to maintain Turkey's balance of secularism and democracy. Experts say plotters this time had hastily conducted the coup attempt and did not foresee resistance from the people.
I think it was a big blind spot of theirs, maybe a sense of smugness which came from a traditional military culture that once, the soldiers are out in the streets and they tell people to go home, it'll be just like in the past, people will just stay home and then we'll be in charge.
The Turkish government has blamed exiled US-based Islamic cleric Fethullah Gulen for staging the attempt. Deciding his fate has fueled a sharp conflict between Turkey and Washington. Turkey is a leading NATO member, plays a key role in the Syrian conflict, and is an important EU partner in solving migrant crisis. It's been trying to join the EU for many years and is currently in reconciliation process with Russia and Israel. But Ankara's crackdown after the failed coup is worrying for EU leaders, who warn that the coup attempt is no reason for Erdogan to disregard the rule of law. While the dramatic incident might have put Turkish leaders in the spotlight, stability for both the nation and the region still remains the bigger question.
And for Turkey's failed coup in Beijing, we have Hua Liming, who is a fellow at the China Institute of International Studies and also former Chinese ambassador to Iran and the United Arab Emirates. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador, to our program. Meanwhile, joining us, we have in Ankara 2 guests. One is Hussein Bachi, who is a professor from the Department of International Relations of the Middle East Technical University. Welcome, Professor. Also joining us from Ankara, we are having Dr. Bülent Ali Reza, who is a director and senior associate for the Turkey project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Dr. Ali Reza, welcome back as well. So, may I start with you, Professor Bachi, since you are in Ankara and you are a Turkish yourself. Let me ask you, we have already heard news about detained, sacked, and also got rid of from the post military, police, judiciary, and the interior ministry. So how many people is likely in the future to be moved away from their post? How long this will continue, Professor?
First of all, I'm the witness of this failed coup since Friday night, and I have been even giving live interviews when the city was bombed. The question is how far and how long this process will go. I think Turkey is at the moment now trying to clean up the group of people who wanted to change the state structure to get the government down, and more or less it is clear that it was the Fethullah Gülen supporters, as the president and government already said this. And at the moment, while we are talking now in some parts of Ankara, there are some clashes, as this midday we had. So the question is not that the plot is now finished. On the contrary, there will be some other casualties and a lot of troubles, domestically speaking, in the long run. Probably the military and the judiciary, there will be many people who will be taken away from their positions. The number will increase. Yesterday we had 6,000. Today it is already 9,000. Maybe tomorrow it will be 10,000, 12,000. We will see.
Dr. Ali Reza, what about you? What do you think? At this moment, many from the West, including the EU and the United States, are advocating, quote-unquote, the rule of law in Turkey. What do you make of the situation? Can the so-called rule of law be the rules that President Erdogan will enjoy?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I normally join you from Washington, but I happen to be on a research trip to Ankara, and I find myself here during the coup. So I'm able to report from Ankara.
Great to have you, sir.
On the impact of the coup. Now, the coup is... Thank you. The coup is over, but its aftermath is continuing. We have a situation which is calm, but relatively calm, but relatively normal, but there's some degree of tension underneath. Now, what the EU and the United States are concerned about when they talk about the rule of law is the danger of overreaction. Now, clearly, those who were involved in the coup will have to face the consequences. Those who were implicated in the coup, even if they were not involved in the fighting, are obviously also going to suffer. But the Western allies of Turkey are concerned about what a major purge might do, how much that would increase the tensions within society, increase the polarization, and in fact raise the dangers of instability, which neither Turkey itself nor its allies want.
Right. Talking about polarization, one of the things people really want to know is what about the relations between the military now and the government, as the relations between them has always been quite sensitive, but at the same time very important. The attempted coup in Turkey is not certainly the first time the country has seen political takeover by the military. This time, of course, it failed. Let's take a look back at some of the key coups in the country's history and how they have shaped today's Turkey.
In 1960, young military officers rose up against the Democratic Party in the nation's first coup. A Turkish general took charge both as president and prime minister until 1961. In 1971, a troubled economy in the late 1960s became the tipping point for Turkey's second military coup. A retired naval officer was installed as president in 1973. In 1980, after years of violence between right and left-wing groups, which resulted in 11 prime minister changes, the military took over by force. In 1997, after Turkey's Islamic Welfare Party received large gains in the 1995 election, the military forced the Islamic Prime Minister to resign and ended its coalition government.
The last time the coup succeeded was 1980, 35 years, more than that. How come this time again, unlike the past 3 decades? And it is also, again, with a failure, which has never happened before. Ambassador Hua, from afar, what do you think about this?
Well, since the revolution, or since the coup of Kemal Atatürk, 100 years before, the military has been always played a very strong role in Turkish politics, and they have succeeded to make such kind of coup for 4 times. But this time, no, because the situation in Turkey has changed, especially since 2002, when the Erdogan-led AKP ruled the country, and especially when he became the prime minister, he and his government try to neutralize the role of the military. So actually the military has been very much weakened and even amended the constitution of Turkey. So military could do very little. But this time, some people in the military, they did something, but I think that destined to fail this time, because still Erdogan has a very strong base among the Turkish people, and he still is a popular president. He has majority of the votes in Turkey.
Yes, indeed. But Professor Bashi, will this time the failed coup once again strengthen Erdogan's power inside the country? Will he be, by quote-unquote the overreaction described by the others, overtake the country, even more power into his own hands?
Yes, I think this will make Turkish President Erdogan much more stronger. He has survived this coup. By the way, it is not first time in the history of Turkey. It was in 1962, also a coup which failed, and the leaders of this coup have been hanged. They were military. But the difference today is that it is not a military coup d'etat try to get this President Erdogan because they have different political ideas. No, no, it is not. It is the people who have been part of the system and belonging to Fethullah Gülen movement. And now this is the, if you want, fight, a brother fight between two groups which had this similar worldview. The man who was the leader of the coup, the Air Force commander, has been supported by this government. Actually, he should have been already out of the office. But in the 90s and early 2000, the people who have been suspected to have been somehow relations to the military, to the Islamic organizations, they were gradually kept out from the military. But both President Erdogan now and then the Prime Minister and President Gül, they have been having always reservation for those people who have been suspected by the military that they have this type of relations. Now, it is now a coup d'etat try where both sides actually have been supporting each other. All the generals which have been now involved in it have been supported by the government. So the president is directly responsible, of course, for the promotion, whatever it is. Tayyip Erdogan is now getting stronger. He is celebrated as the hero of democracy, and I don't know whether it will lead to the presidential system as he wants to see in the country.
Well, if Professor, you don't know, let me ask Dr. Ali Reza, probably as someone, as an observer, it's easier to say and predict what would happen with the executive presidency system. Of course, Mr. Erdogan have always liked to see, and will that mean what some call authoritarian regime? Of course, that has been a terminology being used by the Western press a lot. What do you make of it?
Well, he may have been strengthened by the fact that he was able to beat down the coup with the help of the masses who adore him, who turned up in the many thousands at the airport, both in Istanbul and in Ankara, and frankly made it impossible for the coup plotters to win. But it's worth stressing that one other reason why the coup failed, as has already been stressed, is that the military itself was very badly divided. Most of the military machine did not participate in the coup. Now, from President Erdogan's point of view, this is not something that he would have wanted, because he and the AKP, which has been in power since November 2002, have, as the ambassador stressed, beat down the power of or reduced the power of the military establishment, which had been dominant in Turkish society for so many years. And then they stress their assertion that Turkey was no longer a country that was going to be afflicted by coups. The fact that a coup attempt, and this was a full-blown coup attempt, in which the center of Ankara, where I'm speaking from, was bombed, is unwelcome news for the ruling party, because it introduces, as I said, a degree of instability. Now, he may be able to ride on his popularity, which was never doubted, and push through his desire to actually make de jure, formalize what is already the case, which is his de facto rule.
And therefore,
but at the same time, questions...
and therefore, Dr. Ali Reza, I would like to follow up by asking you, and please provide a brief answer, even though things could be very complicated when it comes to Turkey's situation now. So we see a President Erdogan facing both internal pressures and also international issues. Internally, he's got terrorist attacks that he had not predicted, and certainly with huge casualty, and also the KPP, as he sees it, the PKK rather, as he sees it as a big problem, and meanwhile the Syrian Kurds as well, and also the so-called zero problem with neighboring country never realized. He has problems with many countries, not to mention the recent conflict in Syria, and also the accusations of some Western countries of him supporting jihadist groups, and his administration providing certain actions to do that. So all of these are uncertain issues. So does this coup in a way prove that he is not really as tight grip on the power as many predicted or thought he was?
I'll try to be as brief as possible. It is a complicated issue. But to actually put it in simple terms, Turkey is facing domestic problems and external problems which are linked to each other. Right beyond the Turkish border in Syria, there has been an ongoing civil war in which Turkey has backed the opposition groups to Assad. And recently, Turkey has seen both Russia heavily supporting Assad and the United States getting involved with the Syrian Kurds over Turkish objections in the fight against ISIS, and the possibility that Russia and the United States may be cooperating. Now, this is unwelcome news for Turkey. What is in fact happening with the ISIS terrorism within Turkey, on top of the PKK terrorism that Turkey suffered for over 30 years, is that Turkey is now facing the twin threats of PKK and ISIS terrorism, and in effect, the spread of the fire in Syria and, to a lesser extent, Iraq, into Turkey itself. Now, Turkey was seen to be immune from this before. Now questions are being raised about the durability, or more correctly, the vulnerability of the Turkish system. And, you know, I don't think that there's any question that President Erdogan's authority is being challenged at the moment. But from his point of view, this is undesirable that this is coming at this particular juncture when what he wanted to promote was the idea that Turkey was a stable island in the middle of this instability in the Middle East.
Then what's next, Ambassador? Of course, it's very hard to predict from outside, and nobody knows, even President Erdogan. But will he be having the tendency of gripping the power ever tighter internally, even reacted externally against some of the other countries, just to make sure there's more political stability inside? If that could be the case, what would that mean for everybody else?
I'm sure after this coup, I think the personal position of President Erdogan will be strengthened because he has a very strong hand now after the failure of the coup. But as a whole, Turkey has been more destabilized. The country has been more destabilized. And before the coup, Erdogan has enough problems both at home and international with its neighbors. We remember in 2002 when he became president, I think he was regarded as a successful president in Middle East because he raised the GDP, Turkey GDP yes. per capita from $2,000 to $10,000 within 8 years. And he really created international relationship with neighbors, as you said, zero problem. And Turkey was a very good image among his Middle East neighbors.
But not different.
Now, no more. Since 2011, when the Syrian war started, President Erdogan decided to involve deeply in Syrian civil war and had so many problems with his neighbors, with not only Syria, Iran and Russia too. So now I think he has a lot of problems to be solved by him.
I see. It's not just the relations with neighbors, but also what about with the United States? What about with the European countries? Professor Bashi, we understand your country at a very critical place geographically between the Middle East and also Europe. Meanwhile, your country is a huge member of the NATO, having the biggest military next to the United States among all NATO members. And you are absorbing 2.7 million immigrants almost over the past few months. So it seems a huge role you play. Yet the question is, will Turkey still have the trust of the others after this, particularly when internally things begins to change? Professor Bashi.
Good question, first of all. Indeed, Turkey's geographic location makes Turkey in a position, it is an imperative that Turkey has to have good neighbors around herself, and President Erdogan was making an important U-turn in recent weeks when he was signing with Israel the treaty and also with Russia, apologizing, and the relations started once again. So Turkey is in foreign policy trying to be more flexible as before, and definitely the Middle East developments, the Arab Spring was not so good for Turkish foreign policy, and the previous Prime Minister Davutoğlu had certain idea fix, and now is out. Now it is much more pragmatism is back, and Tayyip Erdogan is definitely a pragmatic political leader, a political animal in this sense, and he knows also now, domestically speaking, he has to be the leader of unifying the country. Whether he will do it, we will see, but definitely, as Ambassador said, is so strong, never ever before.
Dr. Ali Reza, what do you think, particularly from the West Eye, since you are based in Washington, D.C. with CSIS, there was a belief that Turkey is extremely important, is too big to fail, or even too big to fall. But now, with this coup, unpredicted by the Western intelligence agency, including that from the United States, many are asking the question, do we really understand what's going on inside Turkey? And that question mark will lead us to an overall paradigm change of how to look at this country and analyze this country.
Well, it looks like even the Turkish intelligence services missed the coup. So if the Western intelligence services missed it, and I think that they did, they're not alone. You know, you're absolutely right in asking this question, because it's the perception of Turkey that may change because of this coup. Because, you know, Turkey is an important country, and even though there were problems between Turkey and the United States, and also Turkey and the European Union, nonetheless, the relationship was continuing on the premise that Turkey itself was stable, even if there were problems with it. Now, this has raised questions over the stability within the country. And that perception is something, as I said, President Erdogan and the AKP would not have wanted to see. Because, look, the kind of things that we saw in Turkey happen in third world countries, happen in Syria, they happen in Iraq. They were not supposed to happen in Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, it's an aspirant for EU membership, and frankly, what we saw was the kind of things that undermine that image. Now, the relations between Turkey and the Western countries are durable. I think they will survive this, but nonetheless, there will be a period in which there will be some reassessment of exactly how stable Turkey is.
Before we go, Ambassador, with us here in Beijing, very briefly from you, just follow what Dr. Ali Reza just said. There seem to be already stories going on about how the U.S. would react to the Turkish president's demand, for example, to extradite Mr. Gulen, which the president of Turkey has been accusing as the leader of this coup, while others do not necessarily agree with him. What do you make of the next step of U.S.-Turkey relations? By the way, the airbase is still going on at this moment.
Yes, I think that Mr. Gulen actually he's a spiritual leader of all those supporters. Maybe his supporters this time has participated in this coup, but I personally, I'm not sure he is involved in all these plans of the coup d'etat. So I think the United States will be very reluctant to extradite this man to Turkey. And the U.S. and Turkish relations will be affected also, really.
We'll see how things would go. There are so many things happening all at the same time over the past few days. Gentlemen, certainly we're going to invite you guys back again. Thank you so much for now for your perspectives and also your insights. Dr. Bulent Ali Reza, Professor Hussein Bachi, and Ambassador Hua Liming. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. The Philippines says that talks with China over the disputed South China Sea is in the pipelines. A change in tone from former President Aquino's hard line toward China. What's in store for China-Philippine ties at this moment? You're watching World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm Tian Wei. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte said he was asking the country's former president Fidel Ramos for talks with China over the disputes in the South China Sea. President Duterte called for bilateral negotiation with China before a void ruling was awarded by a tribunal in The Hague last week. After 3 years, apparently all parties involved in the South China Sea disputes agreed to address the issue through dialogue.
Back to talks. After 3 years of hiking tensions over the South China Sea, new Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte chose a different way to his predecessor Aquino III and decided to resume talks with China over territorial disputes. President Duterte is reportedly speaking to former President Fidel Ramos about becoming the Philippines' envoy to China for talks. It would be the first time for Filipino officials visiting China since a tribunal in Hague released a ruling on the arbitration filed by Aquino's government. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said China welcomes the move. China has always insisted on bilateral talks as the solution of territorial disputes. Leaders in the region agree that the arbitration case has complicated the situation.
I think the real issue is that something like the South China Sea, both sides need to sit together and have a discussion.
The fault lines between us and among us that we have, that we can manage all these problems peacefully, diplomatically, without violence.
China has openly voiced its stance on the disputes, insisting that the arbitration ruling on the South China Sea case will have no impact on China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights in the region. So far, China has signed boundary agreements through bilateral negotiations with 12 of the 14 countries it shares a border with, under the principle of equal consultation and empathy. Through talks, China and Vietnam has also reached a consensus on the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf limits of the territorial waters in the North Gulf, a clear signal of China's sincerity for good relations.
For more on the South China Sea, all the latest development, we are joined here in the Beijing studio, Mr. Yang Xiyu, who is a senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. Meanwhile, joining us from Manila, we are having Mr. Richard Hedarian, who is a political science professor at De La Salle University. He's also the author of the book Asia's New Battlefield, U.S., China, and the Struggle for Western Pacific. I guess very specific on our topic today. Welcome, Professor Hedarian, as well. So may I ask you, Mr. Yang, about the latest news about China likely to do a military drill in the South China Sea starting from this week until later on Thursday. What do you make of the timing of this, particularly when the U.S. Admiral is visiting China at the moment?
Well, obviously, the military drills in recent period looks like more frequent than before, but that is the part of the picture. The other part of the whole picture, has been U.S. military patrols, surveillance, and activities in South China Sea suddenly increased, much more frequent than before. So that's a corresponding or reactive action from PLA. And I believe the authorities choose this timing when the American mentioned the visit to Beijing to show the attitude from PLA, say, if you increase your military activities here, and so do we. And if you really want to calm down the situation, welcome.
All right. May I just follow up by asking you, will there be a further build-up from all sides of the militaries as a result of the ruling?
Well, ruling, when we talk about ruling, the U.S. think and have been doing, say, they are trying to rewriting the rules in South China Sea. Before 2010, the situation here was basically stable, although there have been disputes because 2002, China and ASEAN reached a very good document, we call it the DOC, and now we are preparing for COC. That's all the efforts for writing rules.
So will there be further military build-up, as from your perspective?
It's up to the situation developments. If U.S. really increase military activities here, say militarization, then China has to increase some military build-ups.
I did notice that, Mr. Yang, you didn't mention much about the Philippines. So may I go to the Filipino panelists that are joining us? Professor Hidarian, what do you think at this moment, President Duterte's approach to the disputes in the South China Sea to China?
Right, as I've been as I have discussed with you guys in previous times that we discussed Duterte's likely foreign policy, the priority for President Rodrigo to open up communication channels with China is to engage China and to have dialogue with China on the South China Sea issue and not to provoke China. And he made it very clear a few hours into his inauguration on June 30 that he's not going to flaunt the verdict by The Hague, no matter how favorable it is to the Philippines or unfavorable to China, in order to taunt China. He's not interested in provoking China. He's interested in a constructive, dialogue-based resolution of these disputes. That is why President Duterte made sure that the Philippine government will develop a very sober and self-restraint position on the Hague verdict, because he wants to reopen communication channels with China.
Right. Professor Hidarian, let me just ask you about the technical issues from your country. First of all, President Duterte asked former President Ramos to be the representative of him to do this negotiation. However, we also heard from former President Ramos, he said, I'm already 88 years old. It is not disrespect to you, Mr. President, but I'm too old to do this. So at this moment, do we see any serious plans coming from the Filipino side to form, first of all, a delegation and a clear plan as to how the Philippines would like to approach China when it comes to negotiations? From your perspective, sir.
Well, based on the information I have, it's most likely that former President Ramos will actually serve as a special envoy to China to kick off communication channels that have been frayed and have been essentially frozen in the last 3 or 4 years under the Aquino administration. Of course, his age is an issue, but I'm sure he's going to also assemble the leading experts in the Philippine mob. So he's not going to take up this job on himself alone. But the choice of Ramos is very important. First of all, he has the ultimate trust and respect of Rodrigo Duterte, to a point that Rodrigo Duterte said that if not for the encouragement of the former president, he would not have run for office. And he thanked him very specially during his inauguration speech. So the two guys are very close, and FVR has very much respect of Duterte. The second thing is, Ramos has a very good track record of dealing with the South China Sea issues and with China. Remember in 1995, the Philippines and China had the mischief reef crisis, almost confrontation. And during the time, the president was Ramos. So despite the fact that Ramos was facing some sort of a territorial conflict with China, he immediately dispatched his top diplomats and later on also met with Jiang Zemin and the top leaders in China. He also kick-started negotiations in the ASEAN that found its denouement or denouement in the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. So Ramos has this very astute, a very deft track record in dealing with China, and among all former Filipino presidents, I think he's the only president who's still alive and who's not very controversial or doesn't have a major baggage.
Right.
So I think he's the perfect delegate to kickstart negotiations with China. Now, what is the game plan of the Philippines? I think as far as the Philippine position is concerned, they feel that they already scored a slam dunk victory against China. Of course, I know China doesn't accept the verdict, they call it null and void. But from the Philippine position, they feel that they have the legal upper hand. But the fact of the matter is that China has the military operational upper hand. So the negotiations will be about how the Philippines can translate its legal victory into actual compromises on the ground. So it's very important for the two countries to find a common ground, especially with the Scarborough Shoal, which could be a very dangerous flashpoint in the South China Sea in the coming months.
All right, Mr. Yang here are very interesting relationship here. So apparently, it is China and the Philippines in a territorial dispute. And there was a arbitrational ruling. The Philippines have been awarded with a sweepingly favor, while China does not recognize, does not accept. But on the other hand, when you look at the military possible confrontations, it is not between China and the Philippines. It is between China and the US that is now doing patrols in the South China Sea. And we all understand, as some scholars have pointed out, it is a proxy conflict in the names of the Philippines, in fact, between China and the United States, as some say. So, Mr. Yang, may I ask you about this? What do you make of the current situation of Duterte administration inside the Philippines? How can he be able to walk this tightrope in a way? He is the ally, the Philippines, of the United States. But at the same time, the neighbor really is China. Mr. Yang.
Well, let's make the July 12th as a turning point. The date the arbitration presented the so-called final award. Before July 12th, there had been a triangle game between China, the Philippines, and the United States. To some degree, the U.S. played a more fundamental role in this game. But now, the new president of the Philippines launched the new approaches and tactics, and China welcome. I agree with my Philippines colleagues' remarks. Say, former President Ramos was a proper delegate to bridge the two governments, because not only because of the reasons he mentioned, but also Ramos is a long time of Chinese friend. No problem. It's a proper person. But on the other hand, in terms of the legal basis, he mentioned that the upper hand or on this side or on the other hand. So in terms of the legal basis, the arbitration is illegal.
All right. We will not go into a debate about the arbitration because we've been debating that for weeks, and now we focus on what's the next step, because China has already stated very clearly it does not recognize, will not implement, and the Philippines said it is in our favor. Let's just put that aside because we're going to talk about a dialogue. So let's just see how dialogue would proceed. Mr. Yang, from our
really
perspective.
hopeful. I think the situation is very hopeful. Number one, if the Philippine government exclude the outside factors, say exclude the U.S. influences, then the negotiation between China and the Philippines can go in smooth way. And secondly, the negotiation between the two sides should be based on, number one, historical facts, and number two, the international law.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Professor Heydarian, also you don't want to filibuster the whole conversation, so briefly from you, what would that mean? Because President Duterte today already made his remarks talking about during the negotiations with China, if it could come true, he and the Filipino delegation is going to take care or take into consideration, in his words, the interests of the allies. Politically correct, of course, that's a statement. But would that mean also things could become ever more complicated?
I mean, Duterte, without a question, Duterte is now under pressure from all sides. From the side of China, he's under pressure not to flaunt and taunt the verdict, because Duterte has the option of saying that, well, because the verdict says that China occupies no islands, that it only occupies low tide elevation, therefore Duterte can call upon the United States and Japan and other countries to conduct what they call free-enough navigation operations, or under the enhanced defense cooperation with U.S. to give them more military access so that U.S. will have more military presence close to the Scarborough Shoal. But I think so far Duterte has made it very clear that he wants to have a much more independent and flexible foreign policy. So he's not going to abandon the allies, but he wants some wiggle room. Remember, Thailand and South Korea, or even Turkey for that matter, are also U.S. allies, either through NATO or through bilateral treaty alliances. Right. But these countries have had relatively independent foreign policy when it comes to China. So I don't think that just because the Philippines has a treaty alliance with the United States, that should tie its hand. Remember, during the Gloria Macapagal administration in the Philippines, we were still an ally of U.S., but we were able to actually have very robust relations with China. So I think that's what Duterte will try to do. And the aim here is to make sure that, first of all, in Scarborough Shoal, there will be no conflict, and hopefully we can find an understanding on how to perhaps share resources or to at least avoid military conflict in that area.
Okay, and Mr. Yang, we only got 40 seconds for you, but we need to let you speak in order to balance the conversation. Everybody have a say. So, Mr. Yang, what do you make if there were thoughts about having a negotiation with the Philippines? How would China prepare for it? And how would the U.S.-China relation not to complicate further the relation with China and Philippines?
Very simple. Two sides, both Philippines and China, should exclude any external factor effects. And then number two, based on the common ground, say both Philippines and China look for joint development, and then for negotiate or bargain the differences. Based on the joint development, we have built up trust and then solve in gradually.
All right. We'll see whether those will happen or not. But thank you so much, both of you gentlemen, for shedding some light on the discussion, at least from your own perspective. Yang Xiyu with us in Beijing, and Richard Hidarian in the Philippines, in Manila with us. Thank you so much for being with us. That is all the time we have today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us. Or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.